Yeah, I'll start recording. Sharing my screen now. Now, you should be seeing what is essentially a blank Lightroom screen. Is everybody seeing that?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, sorry.
Do you want the poll, John?
Yes, you can do a poll, please. Yes, do a poll of members that are with us that they're using Lightroom. So we'll see how that goes. I'll submit my name to the poll as well. See how that goes over the next 5 or 10 minutes. Okay, what you're looking at, I can't actually show you a Lightroom screen that is totally empty, as it were, because in order to do that, I'd have to create an entirely new catalogue. And frankly, I don't want to do that because you can sometimes get in trouble. So I said, what does Lightroom do? Well, you can see from here, we've got on the right-hand side, top, we've got a library module, a develop module, map, book, slideshow, print, and web. And those are the things that we will progress through. Well, some of those will progress through during the course of the evening. I'm illustrating here the fact that we don't appear to have any images in here, but as I said, it is not a blank catalogue. I've got lots and lots of pictures going through years of photography on my system. But I wanted to introduce you to the fact that this is basically what you would get if you installed a new version. So on the left-hand side, or can I just digress for a moment? I'm going to show you my Finder window. If you're Windows, this is equivalent to Windows Explorer, your file explorer. Here are my devices, my iMac, that's my Mac. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 external drives, which I use to store data on of one kind or another. These here are shortcuts to my preferred folders and so on within my Finder window. So I've got 2 lots of photographs. One in this lot here. I've created this since we had COVID, basically. But a lot of my pictures are also stored on this in a folder called Photos. See, there's dozens and dozens of folders going over the years for places I've been. Birmingham Library, Badger Dingle, Berlin 2011, and so on. These other devices that I've got here, I use for backup of various aspects of my photographs and also important documents. So that is what my Finder Windows looks like. So if I go back to Lightroom, you see I've got my Mac there. If I expand that my Mac, these are the photographs that exist. Now, one thing about Lightroom is that it only handles images and video files. It doesn't handle PDFs, Word documents, or anything of that nature. Images, pretty well every image format you might encounter can be handled, and videos. I don't do hardly anything with videos, so we're not going to be talking about those this evening anyway. So the library is in fact all my files and folders that exist on this particular machine that I've actually told Lightroom I want to refer to. Now this is an important aspect of Lightroom, that you need to tell it where the images are. Lightroom does not store the images. It only makes a reference to them. But in the processing of your images with Lightroom, you're able to do lots of things, as you'll see as we go on. But it is not a folder that contains the images. The images are contained where you initially put them. Now, prior to this session this evening, I've actually created a folder with some images I took at a local park a day or two ago, just to show you the first part of the import procedure, which is, and gone up it's just, the poll has just popped up. Lightroom V6 11%, Lightroom CC 32%, interesting. Just Bridge is 14%, and no 43%. So there's quite a lot of Lightroom users, but equally there's a lot of non-Lightroom users. Right, now I've clicked the import button, which was the bottom left hand. Perhaps you might not have got that because the that poll popped up to me and interrupted me. The import button is on the bottom left hand corner of your screen, of the Lightroom screen, that is. Import, little wheel of fortune. That doesn't really matter. Now I know that outside of Lightroom, in my Windows, in my Mac Finder, I created a folder and I copied the photographs I'd taken out on the day. I copied them to this folder called A1 KW Park, Kings Winford Park. The only purpose of giving it A1, it helps me find it because A and 1 is the very top of the list, because the lists are always assembled in alphabetical order. So these are the images I took on the day. You notice that they're all checked, which means that I can import all those directly. I can uncheck all, and I can just check 1, 2, 3, or however many. But on the basis that I took all these images on a single day out, I'm going to select all, so I can just check all. Or the alternatives are, if you uncheck all, the usual keyboard shortcuts work. If I tick the first one, tick one later on, then check the little box, that's those selected. But I'm going to check all. So I'm going to import them all. On the right hand side, you've got, oh, sorry, before I go onto the right hand side, notice that it's asking me to add these photographs to the library. The only other option, or rather the other options are copy as a DNG file, copy as a digital negative file, copy of the images. If I said copy the images, I would be duplicating them and it would be asking me for another folder to put them in. Move them, it would ask me to where I want them to move them to. But in this case, I just want to add them to my Lightroom catalog, a Lightroom library. Now, the settings that you've got when you're adding are just file handling and apply during import. File handling, the first choice is how do you want to build the presets, the previews. You've got a choice of minimal, embedded sidecar, standard, or one-to-one. What does this mean? Well, when you're actually working in Lightroom, the previews that you build when you are importing them have an influence of how rapidly they respond to your actions when you are in the working in the library in the development modules. Minimal, as you would expect, is as small as file as possible. Embedded and sidecar, it's a bit complex here, but with a lot of modern cameras, and particularly mirrorless cameras, the camera manufacturers embed a preview in the EXIF data of the particular images that you are taking. And this will take those embedded previews that are in the camera and bring them into Lightroom. Standard means, well, it's just general purpose one. One-to-one, it will import much more slowly because it's building its best possible previews for you to use later. I generally bring it in this form or standard form because when you've actually made a selection of your images, it's extremely easy to build a one-to-one preview of one or a select few images. So I'm going to bring these in, apply during import. You can adjust the metadata. I never bother to do that. And you can add keywords. You can add keywords. I could put a keyword in here, Kings Winford Park, or plants, whatever. But I don't normally do this. There are occasions I do, but it's and an example of that is, I think it was last year, summer of 2019, went down to Cardiff for my grandson's graduation party. Graduation is, he got his BSc and so on. And I took a load of pictures of him and his family and the family itself. And when I imported them, I just put his name in there, Brad for Bradley. So all the images I've taken on that excursion were keyworded with Brad. You can also apply develop settings. We won't go into that now, but you can apply develop settings if you so wish. So I'm going to import these photographs now. Notice top left hand corner, it's showing a progress bar. And that's finished. So it's imported those images. I don't know what we've got going on here. Oh, it just hasn't rendered them on the screen. Okay, now what has it done? It's imported those images, and it hasn't. Oh, it hasn't. Beg your pardon. I was mistaken with an icon at the bottom. I draw your attention to under catalog. Under the catalog setting, these settings on these options on the left, you can expand or contract by clicking on the little arrow head to the left of the wording. Now, this is telling me that it's imported 20 images. Now, this is called the previous import. It's the one we've just done. And that will stay there until the next time I import anything from another source. But the actual images, if you remember, were this particular file called A1 folder rather, A1 KW Park. So those images are now in that particular folder that I've imported. So I can do whatever I wish to do now with these particular images. Notice on the right hand side, take that selected image, we've got a histogram, we've got a quick develop option. I never use it. I wouldn't recommend you bother with that. And then you could apply keywords. You could type a keyword in there, park. and that would apply that keyword to that particular picture I've selected, or I could select all the pictures and apply the same keyword to those pictures. But what I first do, having gone out on a shoot and then imported them, I go through and I make choices about whether I want to keep it or reject it. Now, you've got quite a number of short keyboard shortcuts in order to do this. Now, what I first look for, I go through the images, and I actually look for those that are total rubbish, and I reject them with the X key. It doesn't delete them immediately, it just marks them for deletion. Now, but in order to progress in a fairly rapid manner, an important thing to check is that I think it's under the photo menu, auto advance. Make that selection, make that a permanent selection in your workflow. Because what it does is when I hit a key to that one, it applies the selection I've made, the rating I've made, and it automatically jumps to the next one and the next one and the next one. So what I'm going to actually do now is I'm going to expand this picture to full screen. Or before I do so, can I just show you that these thumbnails you see in the grid view can be expanded. There's a slider bar down the bottom right hand side, and you can increase or decrease depending how many you've got in your collection there. You can increase the size accordingly. In order to get to that particular picture and see what it's all about, whether it's worthy, hit the space bar and you get a full screen view of it. Now clearly to me that's a rubbish picture, not worthy of keeping, so I hit the X key and that jumps automatically to the next picture in the row, in the grid. That's a pretty rubbish picture as well, nothing's in focus, X. That's not in focus either, X. Well, a bit more in focus, but we've got some cut off up here on that berry, so that's going as well, X. That's even worse, so X. Okay, that's worthy of keeping for the time being. You've now got a choice of how you advance. You can hit the P key for pick, which just means you're flagging it as okay, or you can hit the right arrow key to advance to the next one. I'll hit the P key to pick that image. Not much good about that one, so X. Not much good about that one, X. I don't know, I'll pick that one for the time being. I'll pick that one for the time being. Now, with this particular image, I remember taking this, and when I actually took it, you'll see I spoiled the image with this tendril going over the flower itself. So I did a bit of gardening and broke that off and took a picture of just the bloom on its own. So I can actually get rid of that one. So that's an X. So there's the same image without that tendril. I also took another image following. I'm going to keep that one. The next image I took where I actually focused on the stamen. So I could perhaps consider that for some photo stacking later. So I'm going to pick that one, P for pick. That's rubbish, X. That's rubbish, X. That's not very good, X. I'll keep that one, P for pick. I remember taking that one, was interesting leaf when I took it. Don't look so good now, but I'll keep it for the moment, P for pick. That's not very good, X. That one's okay. Now that is the last one in the image, because when I hit the P key, it hasn't jumped to another image. So I'll go back and look at what we've got now. in our grid view, so G for grid. Now those are the images, and notice all the grayed out ones, those are the ones I've rejected. Notice they've all got a little X by them. The ones I picked have got a white flag. Okay, so I'm now going to get rid of those that I've selected for deletion. You can just hit the delete key, but I'm going to show you the where it is. Under photo, delete rejected photos. You now get a dialog box pop up, which gives you the option to remove them from the library, remove them from this Lightroom library, to cancel the operation and not do anything, or delete from disk. Now, because I went through these and chose them, they're all rubbish pictures, all ready for the dustbin, so I'm not going to hesitate. I'm going to delete from disk. Now, those will be put into my recycle, my trash bin on it's a trash bin on Mac. Well, I've now got those images, which we actually picked. You can proceed and rate your images. Not that any of these are worthy of rating, to be honest, but I'll just show you what I mean by rating. So if I select the first one, I can rate it with the number 1 key, and notice it's put a 1 star underneath. The next one is jump to the next one. I mean, the number 2 key, it's given it 2 stars. The next one, I'm giving that 3 stars. The next one, 4 stars. And the next one, 5 stars. Of course, you wouldn't normally be doing that. I might be selecting, if out of these that we've actually kept, I said, well, there's 3 or 4 that I want to work on, I might give them 1 star each. You've also got rating options from the next one. You've got the keys 6, 7, 8, and 9. I can't use 9 because I haven't got sufficient images, but I can show you. 6 turns it into a red rating. 7 gives you a green rating. I think it's green. The next one is another green rating. I think if I give it 9, it turns it to blue. There is one difference between star ratings and color ratings that you might wish to be aware of. Star ratings are written to the metadata of the file. So if you save that file or use it elsewhere, the star ratings can be read by other softwares from the metadata. The colored ratings, as I understand it, do not get written to the metadata. Give you an example of the use of color ratings. Last year, I did a project for myself. I wanted to create a small book of monochrome images. So I bought a scrapbook from Hobbycraft or wherever, a nice black one. And I intended to put in some approximately 6x4 images, black and white images, you know, that I've taken over the years. So I'd actually built a collection of about 70 or 80 pictures in a collection. We'll be dealing with that later in a moment. So as I printed each one, I gave it a red rating, for example. So within the collection, I could see all the ones I printed were red, and all the ones I hadn't printed were uncolored. Just a useful tool to keep track of some of the things you want to do. Now, I'm going to unrate these, so I'm going to give that a 0 rating. It's taking the stars off. 0 rating, 0 rating, 0 rating, 0 rating. You cannot do the same with the colors, unfortunately. You have to right click and well, sorry, right click. I can find it. It doesn't always, I'm never sure where to click on this one. Oh dear, can't find it now on the right click. So I think it's on photo, set color label, none. They haven't got a shortcut to this, unfortunately. Set color label, none. Set color label, none. Okay. What I will point out, and I'll go back and I'll rate these once again. 1, 2, 3, 4. We'll just do 4. What's the point of those? Well, you've got a filter bar. You see it here on the right hand side with there's a padlock by it, filter off. If you don't see that in your Lightroom, you go to Window, View, Show Filter Bar. So filter off, but I click on the little right hand side there and I go to Rated. Now I've got a choice there, you see. Now it's going to pick anything with 1 star above. If I click on the 2 stars, I've only got the 3. If I click on the 3 stars, I've only got that one, those 2. And if I click on that one, 4 stars, I've only got that one. So you can turn those off. You have the choice of saying rating is greater than or equal to, or rating is less than or equal to, or rating is equal to. So if I set the rating is equal to 1, that's what we've got. If I say the rating is equal to 2, that's what we've got. So I'm going to turn off the ratings now. If I can find where the off is. Filters off. I'm going to unflag those, unrate them. Okay, we've now gone through an import from a set of photographs I'd already got on my machine. There could have been something I did last year, whatever, and never bothered to bring them in. So I've got here, I don't know whether you can still see my video, I've got an SD card I'm going to put into the side of my machine. On the Mac, I've got a slot at the side of the screen. You may use a card reader. You may even plug your camera in via a cable. Now, Lightroom has detected the SD card. Here it is, called No Name. It's found the images in this folder here. They're the same set of images that I'd already done in an ordinary file transfer in that previous folder. So they're the same images, but there are more of them because I called some of them earlier. Now, notice that the options change here. Copy as DNG, which I don't wish to do. Copy. These move and add are not options when you're importing from an SD card. File handling is exactly the same. I'm going to use it as embedded sidecar. File renaming. You can rename your files. I'm not going to go in detailed options here, but you can change the file name, leave it as is with the extension. You can have file name as a custom name, original file number, sequence, and all these options. I don't normally bother doing that, so you can collapse that option. Apply during import, that's the same as before. You can apply presets. You won't bother. Destination. Now, this is where I've forgotten to do something, so I'm going to have to do it a different. I've forgotten to create a folder. I wanted to create a folder in Lightroom. I'll show you how to do that shortly, but I'm going to have to do it now rather than go back out of the import. I'm going to hang on, my Zoom members is hovering over those. I want to put it in this folder called New Photos. And I'm going to put it into a subfolder. Oh, hang on, I haven't selected New Photos, I'm sorry. New Photos. Need to select that. I'm going to put it into a subfolder. Strangely, I don't normally do it this way, and you must forgive him for a moment. I'm going to call this subfolder Kings Winford Park. Okay, I'm just going to go ahead and import that. I hope this goes right. It's doing the same as it did before. Did you notice it said eject card after import? That's having imported all the images, it's told me I can eject the card now without having to go and eject it in externally. Taking a moment to build the previews. I don't know why they're not popping up. Don't normally have this problem, ladies and gents. I've got to say that, haven't I? Just bear with me a moment while I'm for some reason it didn't put these in the folder I wanted it to, so it's gone a bit astray for me, ladies and gents. It's in the folder New Photos. So this is what I should have done in the first place before I imported them. Go to my top level folder, right click and create folder inside New Photos. I'm going to give this a name, Kings Winford Park. Now notice that's appeared grayed out down here because there are no images in that folder presently. Now the images I imported started here and ended there. Now I don't know why some of these are grayed out, I must confess. But I've selected that batch of photographs I imported and I'm going to drag them into Kings Winford Park. moving files on disk. File already exists at the destination, okay. Something obviously went astray when I created the folder in the import dialog. And it's for that very reason I never do it that way. I just happen to slip into that unfortunate circumstance. What I always do, except I didn't do it then, of course, is that I create the folder in the folder or place that I wish to do so. Just to remind you, right click, create folder inside. And what I did, I created Kings Winford Park, and then I dragged the images from their existing position into this folder here. Okay, so we're not going to do anything with these images now because we've already dealt with everything we wish to do in the earlier part of the session. So what I'm going to go into now is into the develop module. Now, what I've actually prepared beforehand is I've prepared a collection. Now, some of you may know what the collection is, others may not know. If you remember at the outset, I said that Lightroom has got knowledge of where all these images are. They're not actually stored in Lightroom, they're on your disk drive, whichever one it may be, and Lightroom has now got a reference to where they are, and it's got a preview of what those images are and what they look like. One of the additional facilities that you've got in Lightroom is to create a collection. And a collection is just another imaginary folder where you can put pictures in from various folders. Now, I have collections down here, you see collections, and at the very top, again, for the purposes of this talk, I've created a collection called 1A LR Lightroom Lecture. And I've got 3 images in that collection. 1A just brings it to the top. Now, I've actually set that Lightroom collection as a target collection. See, that's checked there. And I think that plus might mean that. I'm not sure about that. I'll have to double check on that. Now, as a target collection, it's just get into a collection is just a quick way of referring to numerous files that could be anywhere on your machine. So I'm going to say, well, I'm going to put that image in the target collection. And the way of doing that is just the B key. And that one the same, B. You'll notice when I hit the B key, there's a message pops up on the window that says added to target collection. Okay, I'm going to now go into that collection, and we see we've got 1, 2, 3 images which I've put in there before, and these 2 images which I've just added to the collection. Now these 3 images, this is the benefit of a collection. These 3 images are from entirely different places on my drives, but I can see them together because that's what a collection does. Now these 2, they don't really belong there anymore, so I'm going to hit the B key to get rid of them. So with a target collection, B key, you could add to them and subtract from them. Okay, we're now in, I'm going to go now into the develop module. Now, one of the things that's vitally important to know about Lightroom is that when you're actually making adjustments in the develop module, bear with me, I want to go to the first image. The adjustments we make here are totally non-destructive. Those of you that perhaps Photoshop users use Adobe Camera Raw, that's exactly the same kind of thing. That doesn't, it isn't destroying your images, it's just making adjustments and keeping record of what those adjustments are. Lightroom is exactly the same. Totally non-destructive. Okay, now this image, as most of you will see, is from Venice. I took many, many years ago with a little camera I've got then. Not a particularly inspiring image, but with the develop module, you can do numerous things. Now, the one thing I might recommend, although it's something I don't need to do, but the one thing I might recommend, first of all, is the first step in the process would be lens correction. Enable profile correction. And this was a Canon PowerShot G10. With a fixed lens on, so there was little or no correction. But if you used a wide angle lens, you've got a little bit of distortion, it will correct that, providing it's got the profile already there. And Lightroom, the later versions of Lightroom, has got literally thousands of profiles to call on. Presently, with mirrorless cameras, as I'm an Olympus user, and the profiles are written to the raw file that comes out of the camera. So this doesn't apply to me now with, but if you've taken this with a wide angle lens and there was a bit of barrel distortion and so on, you pick up what the lens is, you make that adjustment and you will correct it accordingly. So I'm now going back to the basic module. Now, what we've got on the right hand side here is a number of adjusting panels, basic, tone curve, HSL, split toning, detail, etc. Now, an important thing to note, if you've, depends on how you use your Photoshop, if you've got all these open, it can fill up all this space in no time at all. But by going right hand click on the little arrow there, you choose solo mode. What that means is whichever panel you're in, that's the only panel you see. See, the one panel's going, another panel's coming in. But the basic is the one you will use most of. Excuse me, I'll take a drink of water. My workflow is this. I said I don't do lens correction because I don't need to. It already comes out of the camera. So with an image like this, I'd be looking to say, well, I want to crop this image. I've got this horrible crane here over on the left and this stump here. I want to crop the image. So this is the first option on this bar here. That's the crop tool. I've selected that crop tool. Now we've got a bounding box with handles on it. We've got a grid that we can use as a reference. As far as the grid is concerned, if you so wish, you've got a number of options. By pressing the O key, you can see thirds. I don't know what you describe that as. Crosshair. I don't know what that's described as. Smaller thirds. The golden circle. Reference to actual crop sizes. That grid and that grid. I don't usually bother with much. It's one of those two grids. Now, this is fairly straight, but it's not quite straight. So in the crop options, you've got an angle. There's an angle. You see, we've got a spirit level. Now, just looking at this picture, I'm going to say, well, what ought to be level is this part of the dome. So I'm just going to click there, draw the line across that part of the dome, and you see it's shifted very slightly anti-clockwise. So that is now horizontal. So you can choose a reference point in your photograph as to what needs to be level, and you can do it with the angle. You can also grab, grab the arrow at the corner and just do it that way. But the angle is absolutely precise. The other thing I would say, if I were to be doing anything with this photograph, is let's get rid of that crane. Now, before doing so, you've got a padlock over here. Now the padlock locks the proportions of the crop. So if you want to crop that, it stays in proportion, whatever those proportions may be. And you've got quite a number of options: 1:1, 8.5:11, 5:7, and so on, 4:3. Or you can create a custom one. I've got a custom one here, 2.7:1. That's a crop which I use when I'm doing preparing header images for the current website, which is 1180 by 435, which is, give or take a decimal, is 2.7:1. So if I was preparing a header image for the website and I needed to crop it, that's what I would use. In this case, I'm going to unlock this, because what I want to do is I want to get rid of that crane and this stump on the left. So I can pull that in a bit. We can pull that side in a bit. Take a fraction off the sky. Take a fraction off the water. And I'll be happy with that. So I hit the return key and that commits that crop to the image. Remember, it's not actually cropped the image. You've not lost anything at all, because if you go back into the crop, you'll see all the rest of the image is still there. It just made a note in the XMP file. There is a sidecar file written adjacent to your master file of the image. There's an XMP file where there's a little man in the back of Lightroom here writing all the notes about what you're doing with this photograph. Okay, the next tool on this panel here, if you can see me up here on the right, is the spot healing. You can either clone or heal. I'm not going to go into the difference between those at the moment. It isn't entirely intuitive. But this is where you can get rid of dust spots and so on that are maybe on your image. You can adjust the size of the spot healing too. You can see probably better there. I'm adjusting the size of the tool with the square brackets, just the same as you do in Photoshop. Square brackets, increasing, decreasing the size of the tool. You can also adjust the feather of it. See, notice it's a narrower feather there. I don't know whether there's a shortcut key for that, to be perfectly honest. But I'm going to just illustrate what you could do. You could take out that bit of a cane. Oh. Now this has got rid of the crane. When I hover over where I've actually put the spot, this spot on the left is where I wish to clone out. the place on the right is where Lightroom has chosen to take the sample from. And I could, if I so wished, move that, but notice where I'm sampling to, it's going light because the sky is light at the top. So Lightroom's done a pretty good job of choosing what to use to get rid of that part of the crane. I can do another one on this part of the crane here. That's done the same kind of thing. Now, while it's not perfect, and I wouldn't advocate the fact that the clone tool, this clone tool in Lightroom, is anything like as good as it is in Photoshop, but it gets the job done. And if you take, for instance, imagine this was a dust spot on the screen, this waterfowl here, whatever it is. Now, in this case, it's chosen from the right-hand side where there is another one of the waterfowl. Not so good. I'll choose it from there. Okay. So that's your spot healing tool, which you use for a little bit of cloning. I haven't done a very good job there, but if you do want to get in and spend a bit of time, you can zoom in there. And so I'm going to close that dialog box now. Zoom in, just using the this is a default setting, using the mouse click to zoom in. So I could use that clone spot healing tool to tidy that up. Notice I've got a bit of carryover into this part of the building, which I couldn't see at the small scale. But this isn't an exercise in how to clone. Okay, now the next item along is red eye correction. Oh, never used it, but it does what it says on the tin, I believe. The next one along the line is the graduated filter. Just like a graduated filter you fit on your camera, by selecting the graduated filter, and I can draw, I've just pressed the mouse button, hold the shift key down, keeps it horizontal. I can bring that down to there, and I could say adjust the exposure to add a bit of darkening to the sky, a bit of lightening to the sky, whatever you want to do. And you can have as many of these as you want. So I'll create another one from the bottom. Just by clicking and dragging up, I can increase the water and decrease the water. So one thing I'm gonna delete that one, and I'm gonna delete that one. Just going to show you another thing that I've only just very recently learned about the latest version of Lightroom. If I create a filter, sorry, let me just delete that one. And go to color. There's a color box here. I've now got an eyedropper. Just bear with me. I'm going to cancel this. I haven't done this correctly. I said I've only just learned this very recently. Select the color. And you can do, color appropriately to what you believe might be suitable. I'm not going to take this any further because I've only just learned about this particular tool. So I'm going to reset that. The next item along, I'm going to demonstrate with the another photograph. So if you'll bear with me, likewise with the adjustment brush. But staying with this image, these sliders you've got. Hang on. Oh, I haven't closed the graduated filter box. That was still open. So in the basic, now we've got exposure, contrast, highlights, you can take the highlights down, shadows, increase or decrease the shadows, whites, blacks. So those are the adjustments all relating to the tones within the image. By double clicking on the word tone, that puts everything back to 0. Under the presence selections, you've got texture. Now, if I'm going too quick, somebody put the hand up. With regards to the sliders. Texture increases the contrast between, fine, medium contrast areas. Clarity is a similar thing, but is a bit more aggressive. Dehaze does what it says on the tin. It can add haze or dehaze. Vibrance, it sort of enhances the mid-tone vibrance of the colors. Saturation increases the entire overall saturation of the image, even to taking out all the saturation, and you've got effectively a monochrome, but you wouldn't use that for a monochrome treatment. I'm not going to deal with these individually because we don't really have time, but you've got a tone curve. Oops, silly me. I just want to get rid of them. Can't pull them off. Reset. HSL colors. You can increase or decrease the reds, the oranges. See, there's more orange in this than there is red. We're doing luminance of the colors now. You've got saturation of the colors. Oranges really saturate or desaturate the oranges. Whatever you wish to do. Split toning, I rarely if ever do that, but I know it may be in some people's interest. I'm not going to demonstrate it because it won't really affect on this image. Detail is to do with the sharpening of the image. With this, you need to be very subtle about it because it can be overdone. Sharpening, we need to perhaps zoom in a bit. You see the difference between 0 sharpening and a lot of sharpening. We start to get pixelization and so on. With sharpening, the one thing that is always worthy doing is the masking, because by shifting this slider left and right, I'm sharpening every pixel in the image. And you don't really want to do that because the sky, why would you want to sharpen the sky there? Because there's nothing there. By going to the masking button and hold the Alt key down, you see the screen has gone white. The white means everything is being sharpened. Now by sliding the masking tool to the right, now we're only going to be sharpening those parts you can see that are actually white. So those are all the edges that you might wish to sharpen. Releasing the Alt key. Now we've got a decent level of sharpening there without having sharpened the pixels in the sky. If it was a particularly noisy photograph, you've got luminance, noise reduction, luminance. Now by whacking up the luminance here, you notice I've got rid of a lot of, I'm hoping you can see at your end, I've got rid of a lot of the sort of slightly grainy texture of the pixels, but it can go a little bit murky, a little bit milky. So again, you only do that when you really need to. We've mentioned lens correction. I'm coming to transform later. So I'll go straight to the effects. The only reason I use effects is I will apply, if necessary, a vignette. Now you can control this vignette on the midpoint, how big the midpoint is, how small the big midpoint is, the roundness, and so on. I tend to leave those settings as normal. I'll just do a little bit of vignetting, very subtle, if you want to bring the focus of the viewer to the center of the image. Calibration, not for us at this time. Okay, now there's a couple of tools that I haven't covered, which I'm now going to cover with this image. This is an image of a model that was in St. Mark's Square in Venice. When I was there, I went on a morning walk, and she was, I guess, a professional model because there was a crew. There was a photographer and a lighting and makeup artist and so on. And just while they were all milling around, I asked her if I could take a photograph, and she kindly obliged. But what I wanted to use this image for is to show you the radial filter, which is this 1, 2, 3, 4, fifth one along on this menu bar here. So select the radial filter tool. I'm going to put a click in the center of her face. Notice I'm creating a radial, and by dragging around, that radial can be any size, oval, circular, or whatever. I think if you hold the shift key, it stays as a circle. You release the shift key, it's basically an oval. Now what I'm going to do with this one, I'm going to rotate it to the angle of her face, drag it up to her face, and I'm going to apply an exposure. I want to darken all the background. Okay, so that's immediately brought some impact to the photograph by darkening the background. It's also darkened, you know, around this part of her hair, but I don't mind that. I can make this a little bit bigger. This side of her hair is already quite dark because the light must have been, excuse me, light coming from the left-hand side. If I so wish to, for an entirely different purpose, if I were to invert it, there's an invert button down here. Notice that it's the center of the picture that has gone dark and the outside has remained normal exposure. But that isn't what I want for this purpose. Excuse me. So the other thing I wanted to show now is if I right click on this particular filter and duplicate it, I've now got two, one on top of the other. See, there's one, there's the other. There's one, There's the other. The only purpose in doing that, I'm now going to invert it because I don't want to undo the work I did earlier. I'm going to invert that one. Sorry, I've inverted the wrong one. This is where it gets a little bit tricky. Which one of these is? Oh dear me. All is not lost. I'm going to delete it. I'm going to create a new one. There's a new button here. New button. You might think, what the hell am I doing? Just bring that in a little bit. Up a bit. I'm not doing anything with the exposure on this one. But what I am going to do is I'm going to reduce the texture and the clarity because the skin is a little bit so I'm actually reducing, you know, the sharpness of a skin. But at the same time, I've actually reduced the sharpness of the eyes and the lips. So that brings me now to, I'm going to close that, brings me now to the adjustment brush. Adjustment brush is the final one on the right. Again, you can use this left and right square bracket keys to increase or decrease the size of this brush. And I'm going to brush over the eyes. And the lips and the teeth. And by pressing the O key, you can see where I've actually masked. Mask a bit of the eyebrows. Now, because I have got, if you look over here on the right hand side, because I've got auto mask enabled, it does a reasonably good job of only selecting, notice with that eyebrow there, it's only selected the actual eyebrow. It doesn't bother about the bit above and below because that auto mask, it's looking for the lines and edges. I need to turn that off now because I'm going to make an adjustment here to bring back the texture and the clarity to the eyes and the lips. Now, this little button down the bottom left-hand corner of the adjusters turns this particular mask on and off. Look, that's before, that's after. Forward back. Might have overdone it a bit, but we're not here to make the picture right. I'm just showing you what you can do about it. Okay, so those are the radial filter and the adjustment brush. With the adjustment brush, I could create a new brush, make it larger, say, brush round the hair there on that side, perhaps a little bit on that side, and increase the exposure. Now, you've got to be very subtle, otherwise it's and I haven't done a particularly good job. I'm not really spending any time, but you can see where that goes. You can use that adjustment brush to affect just areas of your picture. Just briefly, very finally with this one, I'm going back to the spot healing because these little necklace things, not working, John. Oh, it does. It's just taking time. I've got rid of those little distractions down there, which were those bits of the necklace. It's just taking a few moments to catch up. Okay, I'm going to move on. This is now 1:15, so I'm going to move on quickly to the other element of the develop. Oh, I need to close that window to go to this picture. You say, what the hell is this? Well, it's a picture of my dad and his brother, my Uncle Wilf. As a little project, well, no, Lord, it's not a little project, it's a big project. I've custodian of a lot of old family photographs. I've got a box of about 300 pictures going back to the turn of the century, the 1900th century. And I've committed myself to actually doing the photographs and sharing them with the family. But what I wanted to show you about this, it isn't particularly startling, but I think I simply dropped the photographs onto a piece of card and photographed them with my camera. Wasn't too fussed about them being aligned and so on. So I'm going to the transform tool. If you see on transform, you've got various options, but I like this guided one. I choose guided. I've got crosshairs. I'm going to guide that down that side of the picture. I'm going to guide it down the top edge of the picture. Notice jumping as I'm doing it. I'm going to, oops, sorry, I've clicked and dragged that. I'm going to do this edge of the picture. I'm just doing it by eye, getting it parallel to the edge of the picture I'm seeing. And at the bottom, now that's actually squared the picture up. You can do that with converging verticals and whatever in your images. Now, if I go back to the crop tool, it's unlocked. I'm just going to put a crop down to there, 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 and there. And I've got my cropped image. I haven't cropped it very well at the top. It doesn't really matter. It was the transform tool that I was drawing your attention to. You've got this guided. You've got all these other options. You just play around with them, see how they work. So, with regards to the develop module, I've clicked G to go back to the grid. If I go back to the develop module and go to this one, I will just draw your attention to the fact that there are loads of presets that already live in Lightroom, and you can get presets from various places on the internet. You can in fact pay for them if you so wish. So presets here are shown on the left in the presets panels. Now I'm just going to quickly go down these, and you notice as I'm just dragging down how the picture is changing according to what the preset has been designed to do. I'm just going down them. You've got black and white presets as well, if that's what you want to go for. Let me just point out, if I choose that one as a black and white preset and go to the basic panel, it's actually made, it's not a good example, it's made adjustments to here, but they're not very, there's a good example. High contrast detail, you notice how all these sliders jumped because the presets are really just created by these kind of adjustments on the right hand side. I find I just do them myself as I want to do the image. It's extremely rare I use these. I do use the black and white ones from time to time, but so I'm going to reset treatment when I can get the right, press the right button, and draw your attention finally on the develop side to another set of standards there's a profile in the developer module. Profiles, this is Adobe standard by default. But if you go to browse, you come up with a load of options of what they might, what your image to look like. By pointing to them, it says the difference about these. I'll choose this one and close. The difference about these profiles is that they do not adjust the sliders. They're built into whatever. So you can continue to use the sliders to adjust it exactly as before. Now, you can do as much or as little as you like with profiles or presets. Frankly, I rarely use them. I just enjoy doing the adjustments with the things we've spent some time on. And that's my workflow there. A few minutes left. The map module, never use it because you need to have a camera with GPS where you can actually map out where you've been. Book, never use it, but you can make books. I think they use Blurb. Slideshow, again, you can create slideshows. You have to select the images in the film strip at the bottom to create a slideshow. It doesn't create them in an acceptable form for normal AV workers because that you export them as an MP4. But if you want to do a simple slideshow to show your family, you can do that there. What I do use, unfortunately, haven't used it with any substance since lockdown because we haven't had print competitions in the club, unfortunately. But the print module, I think is extremely good. I'm not going to spend any real time on it. I've chosen an A4 piece of paper here. This is the image we've got selected in the film strip at the bottom. I could change the image to the young lady. I can resize it. Oh, that's moving it from one side to the other. It's not playing ball at the moment. I've been having trouble with this, and I don't know whether it's the latest version. There's a glitch in this latest version. I'm not sure because I haven't printed for ages. But okay, I'll move to the cell size controller on the right-hand side. See cell size? I'll just pause for a moment. Cell size, height, width. See, if you go too far, it turns it the other way around. So once you've got your image sorted in the place you want, you can choose the, if I can find it. I've got draft mode printing checked, I don't know why. In color management, you can manage your paper profiles here. I've got some created for PhotoSpeed papers, PhotoSpeed Gloss, Matte Plus, Oyster, Pearl, Titanium Luster. So you can select those profiles and just print. You can actually adjust your page sizes by going to page setup. You can change that to A3 borderless, for example. You can turn it from landscape to portrait, whatever. So those are all the choices. That's gone smaller because I've now chosen an A3 paper. Something he definitely gone a bit astray with these. Sorry about this, but I don't know what the hell has gone wrong. I could normally control this image size. There we go, I've got it. And then you can just go to print. Okay, I'm going to now go back to finally the last few minutes. I'm going to go back to the library module and show you how you can output your images. Within Lightroom, there is no such thing as save or save as, which at times I find is a little bit unfortunate, but it is what it is. So if for example now that I wanted to submit this image to the club competition, and other images with it too, but let's say just this image, what I'd actually do is I right click on the image and I export the image. This is the equivalent of saving as, but you've got all these options now. You can save it or export it, beg your pardon, to a location, a specific folder. You can have the same folder as the original photo, choose folder later, never usually do that, desktop, document folder, and these others. But basically, specific folder, and then you choose the folder, and you can go and choose the folder from wherever. Let's say I want to save it in there. Let's just say that I do. Save it in there. So it's been saved in that. You can actually put it into a subfolder and you give it a name. Whatever that subfolder, but it could be competition, yeah, it could be PDI comp. There's a subfolder going in this AW1 park called PDI comp.
Would you?
Sorry?
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
What did you right click to begin to save it?
Okay. I'll just cancel that. Select the picture. Got it? Right click on the picture.
Ah.
And then you get this menu come up and export. There's an export there.
Okay, thank you.
There is another way, but for some reason I never do it. It's just habit, isn't it? I've got the picture selected. We've got an export button here. It brings you to the same place. But it's just habit, you know. We don't always learn the best habits. So it's just what I'm used to. So we've chosen a specific folder. We've put it into a subfolder. Do you or do you not wish to add this back to the catalogue? If you were saving this to let's say a USB stick and taking it to friends, you wouldn't want to add it to the catalogue because the USB stick will be unplugged and your machine won't know that it's gone. Your Lightroom won't know where it's gone. But generally, if I were doing this, like say for the club competition, which you're simulating at the moment, I would create. I've got a catalogue. I beg your pardon. I've got a folder that I'm sending this to, but because I want to know where it is and be able to find it later and check it out later, I add to the catalogue. You can rename the folder. You can give it a custom name, or if you're exporting several, you can custom name with the original file number or sequence. That would be custom name Fred Blogs 1, Fred Blogs 2, Fred Blogs 3, and so on. Custom name. This is what I did. This is the last image I exported for the club competition last week. So I could change the name to Venice Girl, for example. Okay. Image format JPEG, which is what the competition requires. I always leave it at quality 100. sRGB color space. Resize to fit. Resize to fit. Now this is where you have to be a little bit careful. If you're doing it for the club competitions, 1600 wide or 1200 high, sometimes you're not quite sure in your crop that it's going to be, if you set it at 1600, is it going to end up at 1295? If it is, it's not going to get loaded to the club competition because it's 1295 and it's maximum of 1200. This is where you have to be a little bit careful. But I'm going to take a gamble on this one and leave it at 1600. Resolution for PDI 72 is perfectly okay. If you were sending it out somewhere for someone to print, you could change that to 300 or whatever. Output sharpening, I don't bother with that. Metadata, don't bother with that. Watermarking, don't bother. Post-processing, the only thing I've got in post-processing is after export, what do I want it to do? You've got choices. Do nothing, show in Finder, open Photoshop, open in Affinity or whatever. I'll just touch on the Photoshop briefly in a moment. Show in Finder. I want to see that I've actually sent it to the correct place. And this will tell me when it's finished exporting. So I'm now going to export this. We've got the export going on up here. It's slow. There we are. It's popped up in my Finder window and it's in New Photos, JPEG, AW1 A1 KW Park. That's where I set it to go. So that's confirmed to me that it's gone to the right place. Fine, don't need that anymore. Don't need that anymore. So now if I go back to that folder, notice now I've got another folder called JPEG in that folder there because it's tiered down offset one step. And there is the image. And when you're in this view, the enlarged view, if you hit the I key, you cycle through information relative to that picture, only a basic information. But one is called Venice Girl, which I asked it to do. It's 1600 by 1200, thankfully. And the date, 31st of the 8th, 2132. So I'll go back to my grid view. So that's now exported that to exactly where I wanted it to go. That could be a folder for your competitions and what have you, wherever they would want to be. Did I say I was going to do something else before a few moments ago? I can't remember. I did say I was going to do something, but I'm damned if I can remember what it was. There we are. Oh yeah, what I need to reinforce is that if you set on a journey with using Lightroom, you should use it virtually exclusively for your photographs. Because if I went into Finder, and I've been working on this folder here, AW Park, if I chose to move that folder somewhere else, or take images away from it, then Lightroom wouldn't know where the devil they are, because Lightroom has already made a record that this image is in this folder, is in that, and that folder, in those folders and subfolders. So if you move them outside, Lightroom will put a question mark on these images, because if you come to edit it, it won't know where they are. So I always use, if I take, for example, I did it early on, didn't I? And I'll just remind you there. I'm just looking at something I can do. Like these two Zoom pictures that I created for the website for ages and ages ago. I could take these pictures, I'm not bothered about these anymore. I could take those and I can drag them into a Kings Winford Park folder. Move the files on the disk. It's moving them from one part of the disk to another part of the disk. Moved. And there they are. Now, if I move those files outside of Lightroom, it wouldn't know where the devil they've gone. So I can take those pictures, I can select them again, and I can move them back into the Zoom folder, move on the disk. As I said, if I did that outside here, Lightroom won't know where they've gone. So I think that's about it, ladies and gents. So I'm going to stop the share of the screen, unless there's any questions I can explain with the screen. Dan, do you want to
Any questions, anyone? I'll unmute. Oh, can I unmute everyone? Oh, I can't unmute everyone anymore. They have to unmute themselves. I can ask them to do it.
Oh, okay.
They've stopped me from being able to unmute people.
Yeah, okay, I understand. So if people want to ask questions, they can unmute themselves and.
Right, yeah. So if you need to do it, it's at the bottom left-hand corner.
Or have they all fallen asleep or gone to bed?
No, most people have unmuted. Yep. I do right.
Are there any questions you'd like me to cover while I've got my screen share still going?
With those
Oh, go ahead.
the images that you've used, were they raw files or had you converted them from raw to start with?
No, I import them. I always shoot raw. Well, I say always, 99% of the time. I shoot them in RAW and they come in. You see the file extension name is ORF, which is Olympus RAW file. And I'm editing them as if they're a RAW file. The only time they're converted to JPEG is when I export them. So if I'm printing, I don't convert. You don't need to convert to a JPEG because you take a photograph from that you've worked on. It's a raw file. You've worked on it, prepared it, take it to print. You print it. You're printing the raw file.
Right.
The only time it goes to JPEG is if you export it. But of course, if you want to shoot JPEG in your camera, you're perfectly. No reason why you shouldn't. Everything works just the same. There's just not the same amount of information, of course, in your JPEG. By way of example, a couple of Saturdays ago, I went down to local cricket because I know I was going to be shooting in lots of pictures in burst mode. I set them as a high resolution JPEG as opposed to shooting RAW. But that was purely by choice. Anything else?
I've got a question.
Yes.
Do you think that Lightroom, as part of Creative Cloud, has had really worthwhile updates, or is it fine to stick with the old 5 and 6?
Well, the way I look at it, Sandra, is if it's a big part of your hobby, using Lightroom and Photoshop and whatever, I think it's very good value for money at £9.50 a month. It's only like a few cups of coffee, isn't it, a month? The one thing that if you've got version 5 or something like that, there is a big drawback in using those old ones. If you've got a more up-to-date camera, version 5 may not read the raw files that your camera generates. So there's another step in the process that you need to undertake, is you need to convert your files from your camera, your raw files from your camera, using Adobe DNG converter. You can download that for free and convert them to DNGs prior to bringing them into Lightroom. But there is an option in the import dialog box. I'll click on import. There is an option, copy as DNG. But I've got to be truthful, I find that extremely flaky and has failed more times than it succeeded when I have tried to convert DNG files in Lightroom. And I've got some friends who have recently bought an up-to-date camera, and they're using Lightroom 5 or 5.7, but they've had to download the Adobe DNG converter program, which is free, quite easy to use, in order to convert their files before they can bring them into Lightroom. Okay.
Yeah.
My camera's out of date as well. So
That's okay then.
Mine won't do it. I did have to convert to DNG when I tried to use Sandra's Lightroom.
But
Okay.
my question was more around the functionality. So I saw that it now has the texture, but apart from that, it almost looks identical.
Oh,
In
yeah.
terms of what it does.
Well, there are a lot more bells and whistles in it that are, they're not immediately obvious.
Okay.
But to be honest, I find for £9.50 a month, it ain't a problem. You know, it's a few cups of coffee, if you go out, and as it's it's my major hobby. So why the hell not? What I didn't go into. Let's cancel that import. So finally, take, for instance, I'll take that one. I can edit in Adobe Photoshop 2020. It'll take it in as a layer. I can edit in Affinity, which I've bought but I've never used. I can open as a smart object in Photoshop. But in addition to that, I mentioned that these two pictures, and I'm not going to do it now because of the time, but that picture and that picture might photo stack. So if I highlight both of them, and I can edit in, open as layers in Photoshop. That's going to go away for a few moments. I'll just take them into Photoshop. I'm not going to try and do the photo stacking because it may not work. Beavering away.
You get that?
Right, now I've got two layers of this image. I'll turn this layer off. On. So there's two layers now. I could attempt to do a photo stack on that if you want me to. Because they're a little bit displaced, it might struggle for a while. Edit. Oh, I've got to select both. I've got to select both layers. Edit. Auto align layers. Auto. It may struggle because there's a fair displacement between these two images. There we are. Okay, it looks as though it's aligned them as good as it can. Notice how the one is out of focus on the outer part of the petals, and the one is that's sharper on the outer part of the petals, the stamen's sharper, and so on. Now if I go back, I'm not going to crop that, but if I now go back to auto blend layers and say okay to stack images, working away. Get in there. There we are. It's stacked that final image. We got a bit of rubbish there because of the trimming. It's still working away, so
Bits of each image together into one.
there we are. Okay, it's so that is the final image.
Oh, he's doing some good.
I could get rid of. See what it.
It's the tool to take them in to line them up.
So that's the mask of the one image, and that's the mask of the other. But that's the final image. I could dump those two. Dump that one. Dump that one. Come on. Dump that one. That's the final image. I do Command S, and it's saving the image down there. Finish saving the image. I go back to Lightroom. There it is. It's called Edit TIFF. Now that is the image that it's just photo stacked. Obviously now I've gone a bit outside the parameters of talk of Lightroom, but it does show the example of how you can work with the Lightroom suite. You've got the latest Lightroom, you've got the latest Photoshop, and they work together if you so wish. Okay, I'm going to stop the share now. Stop the